Here I have a 2013 Nissan Altima and it needs a rear shock, so we're going to go ahead and replace both of them because you should always replace them as a set. As you can see, I'm loosening the lug nuts while the vehicle is still on the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and lift up the car from the lower control arm right here, and we just want to get it high enough so we could fit a jack stand underneath the pinch weld. And I'm going to go ahead and place that right now, and I'll also zoom out so you can see exactly where I'm placing my jack stand. So as you can see, it's going right there. And of course, you always want to use the jack stand. It's a safe thing to do. Do not rely on a floor jack. Now I'm going to start to lower the car, but I'm not going to remove my floor jack. I want to keep the suspension loaded, and that's going to help with torquing everything down later on. So now I could fully remove my wheel at this point. Now we could get a closer look at the rear shock. If you look at this one up here, it looks like it's wet, and that's a good visual indication that something's not right and the shock is blown out. Another thing that they are prone to doing when they're blown out is making noise. So whenever you go over bumps and things like that, you're going to hear a clunking noise from a shock that's blown out. So we're going to go ahead and remove this first bolt. Now that we have that lower bolt removed, the next step is to look straight up from where the shock is at, and we're going to see the two nuts that hold the top hat in place. So you can see them right here. And I'm just going to use a long extension on my ratchet to get up there and remove both of the nuts. Now keep in mind, when you're removing the last nut, you're going to want to use your other hand to hold the shock so it doesn't fall out. First off, let's remove this rubber dust cover on top, set it aside, do not lose it. And we're going to go ahead and remove the jam nut. And I'm just using a ratcheting wrench because it's a lot faster, but you can just use a standard wrench. Now the shaft is going to have these flat spots on it, and I found the best tool to use here is just a crescent wrench to hold the shaft as you remove the nut. And let's go ahead and get this nut out of here. And you want to keep in mind in the orientation that these things come apart. So as you can see, we have a washer here, but it's kind of like concave, and we have the upper bushing. And if you look at this bushing, it's actually worn out. Now I highly recommend that you replace these bushings while you're in here, because these bushings can also cause a noise. So I was sure to pick up a new set of bushings. So once we get the top half out of the way, we can see we have this metal sleeve and the lower bushing. And for lack of a better word, I'm just going to call this the lower cup. So we're going to go ahead and get that out of the way. If you're wondering why we're taking all this apart, it's because we actually need two pieces from the old parts because they're not included with the new parts. So here goes the bushing kit that I got. You don't have to get this brand, you could get any brand you want. And here goes the part number for the shock I got. Same thing, you can get any brand that you want. Here's the contents of that bushing set, and as you can see, it includes the upper and the lower bushing, it includes the pin and the lower cup. So let's start to reassemble all of this stuff. First off, let's install our dust cover. Now I feel like I have to say this because I don't think it's very clear before. The bushing kit is not included when you buy a new shock, so absolutely make sure you buy a new bushing kit. And now we could grab our new cup and just slide that right over the boot. Next thing is to replace the upper and lower bushings, and you can see both of the bushings are going to have like a little lip on them, and the two lips have to go facing each other. You can see it right here, so make sure they go facing each other. It's pretty easy. Once you get them in place, let's go ahead and push in the pin, and it kind of locks in the two bushings together and they're not going to fall out. Once that's in place, you could go ahead and put the entire assembly right over the shock. And don't forget about our concave washer, so let's go ahead and put that in place. And then we could put our brand new lock nut on top, and this one also has the flat spots on the shaft to hold it with the crescent wrench as we tighten down the nut. Now I found that it's only going to turn so much, so you're going to find that one spot where the jam nut does not want to turn anymore, and you're good. You could just leave it right there. It's perfectly snug down. You're not going to have any issues with it. What I like to do is just grab a little bit of a marker, or what I have in hand is this CRC, brake quiet stuff, and it's just personal preference. So if I ever have to come back in here in the future to see if the jam nut is loosening up, but 100% it's not necessary. And of course, do not forget about that dust boot that goes right back on top of the shock. You can see we have the welded on nut on the right side. In fact, I don't think you could flip it around the other way because it wouldn't allow you to put the bolt in. The top hat actually rotates, so that makes that super easy for lining it up top with the studs of where the nuts are gonna go. Once we get those lined up, you can see the bottom half just kind of falls in place, and I think this is a great idea on Nissan's part. If you look at the old shock here, they actually have, for lack of better words, like these little dowels, you see them, and they kind of work as like a locator. So it helps the rear shocks to just kind of fall in place and everything's going to line up, and you can see that bolt just goes right in. At this point, you can go ahead and torque it down. Now, when I looked up the torque spec for this lower bolt, it was actually over 100 foot-pounds, and I tried to reach that and it didn't seem like it was going to go. It actually felt like it was going to strip the threads, and that's just something that you acquire from working on cars for years. I just was not comfortable tightening it that tight because I really felt like I was going to damage something. So I actually tightened that lower bolt to about 80 foot-pounds. And these upper nuts, the torque spec that I have here was correct, and they tightened down to that torque spec without any problems at all. And because I know someone's going to leave a comment about me damaging the lower bushing by tightening down that bolt with the suspension the way it is, well, here's my answer to that. This is why I left the floor jack underneath the lower control arm, and the suspension is currently loaded. It's not hanging down or drooping down in any way. So this is why it's perfectly fine to torque down that lower bolt, and we're not causing any extra stress or anything to that bushing. At this point, we can now put the wheel on the car, put the lug nuts on it, and just kind of snug them down. And once the car is back on the ground, we go ahead and tighten all of the lug nuts to spec. And you want to do this in a star pattern, how I'm doing here, just kind of going back and forth. You don't want to go, in a complete circle, like clockwise or counterclockwise. So once I get the car off of the jack stand, you're going to see me torque down all of the lug nuts. And here's a quick look at the old shock that came off of the car. You're going to see that once I compress it, it doesn't really come back out, meaning it's not really doing anything on the car besides probably just making some noise. So as you can see, this is a really simple DIY, and it's super easy to do yourself and save a few dollars. So I hope the video helped you. If it did, give it a thumbs up, and like always, thanks for watching.